The sixth Bolivia-Peru binational ministerial cabinet concluded in La Paz this Saturday with a series of agreements. The first in-person G20 summit since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic is being hosted by Italy. The Scottish city of Glasgow saw protests this Saturday ahead of the inauguration of the COP26 climate summit. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Bolivia, where the sixth Bolivia-Peru binational ministerial cabinet concluded in La Paz this Saturday with a series of agreements. The event saw the first official meeting between President Luis Arce and his visiting Peruvian counterpart Pedro Castillo. The agenda included talks on infrastructure for integration, cross-border water resources, social policies and security. President Arce also presented Castillo with the Order of the Condor of the Andes, the highest distinction granted by the plurinational state of Bolivia. And President Pedro Castillo emphasized the need to work together to the benefit of the most vulnerable sectors in both nations.
We ignored the borders between Peru and Bolivia, and in the framework of the 7th binational cabinet, we have to address very important points for the people to note the difference, so that men and women who are in this binational space know that there are cabinets and governments on both sides that we are concerned with and working for them. Let us work for the children, for the families, for these vulnerable peoples. That is why we have come here.
Meanwhile, President Luis Arce welcomed his counterpart and highlighted the importance of cultural integration.
Bolivia has always supported integration between our countries, especially with the sister Republic of Peru, where we share not only territories that belonged to a single people before the colony and even during the colonial era, but we also have many cultural similarities that unite us. So for us, it is a great privilege to be here with you and your entire cabinet to start this sixth binational cabinet between Peru and Bolivia.
Bolivian Foreign Minister Rogelio Maita highlighted the European Union's commitment to cooperation during a press conference following his tour of Russia and Europe. According to the top diplomat, during his meeting with the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Joseph Borrell, the possibility of coordinating on the National Development Plan to be implemented as of 2022 was discussed. In addition, Maita pointed out that the European official mentioned the possibility of visiting Bolivia next year. The Bolivian Foreign Minister met with authorities in Russia, Italy, the Vatican and Belgium as part of his tour. Brazil under President Jair Bolsonaro has seen a surge of far-right groups. Our correspondent Brian Mayer brings us more details on how such extremists are operating in the country.
According to a study at Unicamp University, the number of neo-Nazi cells in Brazil has doubled since President Jair Bolsonaro took office in 2019. Fascism is on the rise, and Brazilian fascists are increasingly coordinating actions with the international far right.
There is a global crisis of capitalism on the way, and there are far-right groups working together, white supremacists and internet activists like Steve Bannon, who project a way of thinking that ends up attracting people who have personal problems, who are unemployed, and we know that fascism is growing right now.
This week, a group of green and yellow-clad anti-vaccine protesters brandishing international white supremacist symbols and signs in English broke into Porto Alegre City Council and threatened members of the Afro-Brazilian caucus while yelling racist insults.
You are my maid! You are my maid! You are my maid! We are the resistance of this entire project that denies science and the right to vaccination, that denies the right to food security, that aims to maintain all the privilege that started back in that violent days of slavery in Brazil.
The Porto Alegre Municipal Guard refused to protect the city councilors, but they managed to expel the protesters from the building by themselves. Brian Mir, TeleSUR, São Paulo.
And now we bring you a recap of some of the top stories we've covered across the Latin American and Caribbean region this week.
We start this news summary in Haiti, where President of the National Assembly of that nation, Joseph Lambert, joined the calls for the dismissal of Prime Minister Ariel Henry during protests against fuel shortages and after the main game boss also demanded Henry's designation.
Guatemala also saw social unrest as the indigenous community of El Estor continues to protest mining exploitation on their land. Hundreds of police officers and military personnel were sent to the lakeside town as the government imposed a dusk to dawn curfew. Protesters demand a better environmental management of the local mining project, which is polluting the Izabal Lake, their main source of income.
Ecuadorians took to the streets this week to protest the fuel prices and other economic oppressive measures of the Guillermo Lasso government. As a response, riot police were heavily deployed and used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. Protesters appealed to the right of resistance and established in the Constitution.
We continue. Hundreds of Panamanians from different sectors of the province of Colón mobilized to reject the increase in fuel prices and to demand that the government of Laurentino Cortizo take action on unemployment, the health situation, and the deterioration of public infrastructure.
A Senate panel probing the Brazilian government's pandemic response asked the Supreme Court and the Prosecutor General's office to suspend President Jair Bolsonaro from social media for falsely linking COVID-19 vaccines to AIDS. As a response, Facebook and YouTube removed the video and said that it violated their guidelines on medical information regarding COVID-19.
This week, Venezuela saw the start of progressive return to on-site classes amidst biosecurity measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. President Nicolás Maduro urged the authorities to reinforce the preventive measures in all educational centers across the country. At the same time, the vaccination campaign for children over 12 years of age began this October 25th.
Similarly, Nicaragua has begun immunizing children as young as 2 years old against COVID-19 using Cuban and Russian vaccines. The youngest children are receiving Cuba's Abdala and Soberano vaccines, while those between 18 and 29 years of age are getting shots of Russia's Sputnik-like in a single dose.
We continue. Cuba's Communist Party has presented evidence of the links between the organizers of an anti-constitutional march called for November to promote political subversion against country from the United States, such as Omega 7, Alpha 66, and the National Front for the Liberation of Cuba, among others. Also, Cuba's National Assembly approved 4 laws introducing reforms to the country's judicial branch. Lawmakers approved the bills on the courts of justice, criminal proceedings, administrative procedure, and the procedural crow, initiative presented by the Governing Council of the People's Supreme Court.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The first in-person G20 summit since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic is being hosted by Italy. Leaders from the world's 20 leading economies will discuss the global economic recovery, climate change, COVID-19 vaccines, the supply chain crisis and rising energy prices. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi stressed the importance of multilateralism on Saturday as he welcomed world leaders to Rome. He also used his opening statement to issue a call for redoubled efforts to get vaccines to the world's least wealthy countries.
We must be aware of the challenges we face collectively. The pandemic is not over, and there are startling disparities in the global distribution of vaccines. In high-income countries, more than 70% of the population has received at least one dose. In the poorest ones, this percentage drops to roughly 3%. These differences are morally unacceptable and undermine the global recovery.
And in the framework of the G20 summit being held in Rome, Russian President Vladimir Putin condemned the obstruction of the international vaccination campaign against the novel coronavirus by certain states.
We propose to instruct the Ministries of Health of the G20 countries to work out the issue of mutual recognition of national vaccine certificates as soon as possible. Despite the G20 decisions, not all countries that need them can have access to vaccines. This happens partly because of dishonest competition, protectionism, and because some states, especially those of the G20, are not ready for mutual recognition of vaccines and vaccination certificates.
Addressing the G20 via video link, Chinese President Xi Jinping underlined that China will remain open to the outside world, providing opportunities to all countries to work towards development.
The ancient Chinese said that honesty is the foundation of making friends with the world. China will adhere to the basic national policy of opening to the outside world, give full play to its super large-scale market advantages and the potential of domestic demand, and strive to promote institutional opening of rules, regulations, management and standards. We will continue to increase the protection of intellectual property rights, create a market-oriented, legalized and international business environment, and provide Chinese and foreign companies with a fair and just market order. I believe that China's development will bring more new opportunities to all countries and inject more new impetus into the world economy.
Japan is gearing up for its general elections this Sunday. Over 105 million Japanese are eligible to vote for the 465 members of the House of Representatives, who will serve a term of 4 years. The party or coalition that wins a parliamentary majority will inaugurate its candidate as Prime Minister in an extraordinary session. The election marks the first test for Fumio Kishida, who became Japan's new Prime Minister, in the ruling Liberal Democratic Party's internal consultations held on September 29th. Official results are expected to be released on Monday. In Bolivia, the national and local governments are preparing measures to be implemented in the face of the imminent fourth wave of the novel coronavirus pandemic, which has already begun to manifest itself in 3 of the country's 9 departments. Our correspondent Freddy Morales brings us the details.
Mayors, governors and the national government are in charge of the 3 levels of healthcare. They all participate in this kind of summit that defines measures to face the imminent fourth wave of the novel coronavirus. They are committing themselves to implement more vaccination points, to carry out campaigns in markets and other centers with a high influx of people, and this will be intensively extended.
We have to fight together against the anti-vaccination groups. That is the biggest problem we have had in the city of El Alto, the platforms that misinform about vaccination.
The stock of resources to deal with the fourth wave is promising. Vaccines are available, although there is still resistance from sectors of the population to receive them. And there are enough free medicines available. The number of antigen diagnosis points nationwide has increased by 2,567. And we have acquired 4,435 antigen tests. Similarly, in terms of human resources, we are committed to immediately hiring 1,806 people to continue strengthening the intensive and intermediate care units. Vaccination has reached 63% of the population with the first dose, and more than 53% with the second dose, at a time when it is virtually accepted that the fourth wave has already entered the country. Some departments where this is the beginning are Santa Cruz, Cochabamba and Chuquichaca. But we cannot speak of fourth wave in the country because there are no several departments that do not have a fourth wave. President Luis Arce from the Department of Beni called for an all-out fight against the novel coronavirus and recalled that this is also a definite phase in the fight against poverty. We must all be aware that the economic recovery has a fundamental assumption. To recover health for all, there will be no reconstruction, no reactivation of the economy in the country if we do not solve the pandemic problem first. From March 2020 to date, the country has officially recorded 505,000 cases of the novel coronavirus, with almost 19,000 deaths. The case fatality rate in the second and third waves was 2.7%, with an imminence of the fourth wave. The health ministry warned that in case of flu or cold is considered COVID until proven otherwise.
Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Scottish city of Glasgow saw protests this Saturday ahead of the inauguration of the COP26 Climate Summit. Protesters from Extinction Rebellion and other environmentalist groups marched through the centre of the Scottish city in a warm-up to the many events taking place from Sunday as world leaders prepare to participate in the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference. Activists are seeking to convince leaders and delegates to the event to ensure that they take the urgent and necessary action to properly tackle the climate crisis. A reported 10,000 police officers will be patrolling the area around the COP26 venue for the coming weeks, with forces from outside Scotland drafted in to bolster numbers.
Joined together because we care for the planet, and we're trying to talk to communities along our way about climate justice and about what people can do to move into activism to give people hope and faith.
Officers every day.
And residents of the Scottish city of Glasgow expressed mixed feelings about the COP26 Climate Summit set to kick off on Sunday.
A little disappointed in some regards that some of the larger countries, world leaders aren't attending, because they do tend to be some of the larger polluters, and the fact that they're not attending, I think, says it all in reality.
I'm very proud that the COP26 has been held in Scotland. It shows that Scotland is trying to lead the way, especially I believe in wind power and like electricity power, you know, so that we're trying to become carbon neutral, which would be fantastic.
The United Nations Secretary-General called on the youth of the world to maintain the pressure on global leaders to act on climate change. In a taped address, Guterres described the climate crisis as a code red for humanity.
The climate crisis is a code red for humanity, and young people have the most at stake. Thank you for standing up for climate action in your communities, on the streets and online. I wanted to know it's making a difference. Thank you for telling it like it is and calling leaders out for lack of leadership, for excuses of measures and empty promises. I share your frustration and anger because time is running out. The only future for humanity is a 1.5 degree future. Tomorrow, delegates will begin the COP26 negotiations. Leaders must not only commit to net zero by mid-century, but show us how they will achieve it. We need to see concrete action now.
Thousands of Sudanese poured into the streets on Saturday to protest against a military coup earlier this week, which threatens to derail the country's transition to democracy. Pro-democracy groups had called for mass protest marches across the country to press their demands to reinstate the dissolved transitional government and release senior political figures from detention. According to local authorities, at least 8 people have been killed and 170 wounded in protests since the army's power grab on Monday. The list of demands also includes dismantling paramilitary groups and restructuring the military, intelligence and security agencies to remove officers still loyal to ousted President Omar al-Bashir. South Africa's veteran anti-apartheid icon Desmond Tutu appeared before journalists for the 3rd time this year to cast an early vote for local elections this week. The Nobel Peace Laureate, who recently turned 90, voted alongside his wife Leah in their Cape Town home. Ordained at the age of 30 and appointed Archbishop in 1986, Tutu lobbied for international sanctions against white minority rule and later for human rights on a global scale. After Nelson Mandela's election, Tutu headed a commission investigating human rights violations perpetrated under apartheid. South Africa's municipal elections will take place on November 1st.
The process went well. It went well. They cast their votes, both of them.
Were they happy? Tell us a bit about the demeanor.
He was happy.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.